Hi, welcome to another video, and in this video I want to talk about rows and columns. These are two very basic building blocks for all your applications, and I just want everyone to understand how they work. And to demonstrate them, I'm going to show off the examples page. Again, this is part of the Solid demo app. But here we have a row with a whole bunch of items, and we have another row with a whole bunch of items. And you'll also notice I can go up and down between the two. So there's one column and two rows. And I'll show you how this is actually created. We'll jump into the code. And so here is the code for this page. So we have, again, one column and we have two rows. So one row here for the top row and one row for the bottom row. Now I have two hard-coded rows. So I have demos and flex demos. And demos and flex demos is just an array of items that I'm looping through to print out these demo tiles. So nothing special going on here, but you could be making an API call. You could have another for loop in here, which is creating all the rows. But this is probably one of the simplest examples I could have is we have one column and then we have two rows that are direct children of the column, and we're navigating left and right. And so I just want to point out a few things here. One is our column has an autofocus attribute. And that attribute then designates that when the portal page loads, the column will receive focus. And then it is going to forward focus to its first child, which is this row. And then this row is going to forward focus to the first demo tile once it's created. And that's the thing that has the initial focus. And here, if again, we look back into here, I am pressing right on my keyboard. And it's the row component is doing this nice scroll animation. And it's also changing focus to the next child. So I'm going to dive into the row component because once you see it, you're going to be like, oh, this isn't as complicated as I thought it would be. So again, here's my portal to demonstrate how I'm using the row and column component. And here is the actual row component on the left here. Bring that up later. So here is our row component. And it is, again, just a view tag with a whole bunch of functions on here. And since this is a reusable component, it allows you to pass in your own one left handler, one right, but it has a default one that it's handling. So again, the row component is handling left and right key presses, and it is calling on left and on right, which is doing this handle navigation, which I'll show that function in a second. But you can also pass in your own on left and on right, and it chains them together. So it will call yours and then call the next one. And let's actually look at what it's doing under the hood. So again, the row has a notion of selected, which is just a number of the index of the child that is currently selected. It defaults to 0, but you could pass in a different value if you want. And then as you press right, we call this handle navigation. And so then if the direction is right, it goes through the selected, it goes through the children, finds the next child that is allowed to receive focus. Because you could skip focus on some. So if you have a child with a skip focus attribute, it will actually go to the next child. So this is useful if you have a row or column with maybe titles in it and you want to skip through it to go to the next one. You can put a skip focus attribute on there and it will just jump to the next one. So once the row figures out what is the next child that should have focus, we get down to here. We make sure that it currently doesn't already have focus. And if it doesn't have focus, then we go through, we call on selected change, and we take the active child and we call set focus on it. And that then kicks off the focus manager to say this next element has focus. And we update the selected index to 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Very, very straightforward. The column uses this same function to figure out up and down, left and right, because it's the same thing, just different direction. So the column is almost identical to the row component, except again, X and Y changes and left and right, up, down changes between the two of those. Okay, so now that you have an idea of how this works, I'm pressing right. It's calling the on right handler on the row component, which is then figuring out what's the next child, calling set focus on the next one. And then there's also this scroll animation that's happening. So let's go into how that's working. So there's two pieces. One is the on right is being called, which is then doing this handle navigation. And then we have a scroll function that's being called afterwards. So here is our with scrolling. This, I'm not going to go through all the logic in here. I spent a lot of time writing this and rewriting it and writing it again. But essentially, it calculates what is the position of the row container and then changes the X value to move the row left or right on the screen. And there are different scrolling attributes. So you can set scroll always, which will make it so that it always moves. You can do scroll center, which keeps the selected elements in the center of the screen. You can do auto scrolling, which is the default. So it does similar to edge scrolling. Is you'll notice that as we get to the end, this is set to always scroll, I believe. So always scroll is it's moving it and it's always scrolling. So it doesn't have a full viewport. Let me update that real quick and you can see the differences. So yeah, this is scroll always. We can do scroll edge. So that's another value here. So here, now it's waiting till the edge of the screen before it starts scrolling to the next one. So again, these are different modes that you can play with, but they should all work. If not, open up a bug on the Solid UI repo. And let's see what else to talk about. The other important thing is row is a flex container by default. So it uses flex, and which that means that all the children, once you put in here, the row is doing a flex start layout by default. So it's going to lay out all the child components. You can set a gap on it. And again, it's just, again, a flex container. Right, so that is the row component. Now there's also a column component. Let's talk about that, because you'll notice we're actually switching between two different rows. And that's our column handling up and down. So I'm pressing down, it's going to the bottom one. I'm pressing down and now it doesn't do anything. I'm pressing up and it goes to the first row. And again, this is working very similar to row, is we have a column that has two children, which is row that are rows, and the column is handling up and down key press. So how focus works is this thing has focus. It does not have an up and down key handler. So then it checks the row. Do you have an up down key handler? It's also no. Then it goes up to the column, and this one does. So that's why it's handling changing focus. And all it's doing is the same logic as saying my selected is now this bottom one and setting focus to this, which is then setting focus to its selected demo tile. Yeah, so I think that is about all I have for this. There's a few nice things on here. So one important thing to note for the row and column is you have an onSelected change callback handler. And so every time a user presses left or right, you can have an onSelected change function, which gets called every single time. And that onSelected change, let me see if I can pull that up real quick, is called with the selected number, the column or row, which one is active, so what's the new active element, and then what was the last selected, I believe, number? The last selected number. So you get a whole bunch of pieces of information so that you can, utilize the row or column to its most efficient. And then the onSelected change is also called when the row or column first receives focus as well. So we found like a lot of people were using this and they were expecting onSelected change to be called initially so that you can do some setup. And so now it is. So feel free to check out the row and column component. They are available as part of the Solid UI. I'll put a link in the description so you can check it out. You can check out their demo pages. And again, like, comment, and let me know what suggestions you have for other videos. Thanks for watching.